team players, and welcome back. We are Local Football Flavor breaking down the top running backs for this season of 2024 based upon the PPR structure here. So one thing that makes us very unique and important here at Local Football Flavor is the way that we go about our numbers. And that is we use the metrics of the market to actually tell us who's betting on this. Where's the actual math from the most best sources of the world, which is the sports books that are collecting millions of dollars consistently. So we look at that. That's where our starting information comes. The next piece of information comes is the consistency factor. Because while it is great to have that 1 week where you just get someone to go off, if you're never going to be confident enough to play them, it doesn't really matter. So that's why the consistency factor, especially in the redraft leagues, matters so much. You might have watched some of our other videos and seen us do best balls. Best ball is obviously a different animal when you don't have to set your lineup. With our redraft leagues, it really comes here. And we broke these down into tiers for you. And the tiers literally are where the jump in talent is. And I start off with the first player who's in a tier of himself, should always be the first or second pick in every draft, Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, and we don't even need to talk about it. Christian McCaffrey is the best, and he will be the best until an injury happens. And I want to kind of stoke the fire here too. Is that as we share these rankings out for you, while we might have rankings for certain players at certain tiers, there are players that we are not usually drafting at certain values because we are targeting other positions. And when we get to players like that, we will talk about that. And you'll see a couple of players on these rankings ranked really low that, you're like, oh, I'm drafting them in the first round. Well, where this market is coming in at is that these markets are taking in the idea that, a team is going to score a certain amount of points. They're also taking in that idea that, injuries are going to happen, or the fact that there's a rushing quarterback that may steal the opportunities for these running backs. And so, there are certain players that you'll never find us taking a lot of stock in because of those situations. So,
and they just don't line up. Because the other part with our boards is that there's going to be natural players that you can snag, and some of them you've been seeing us snag all summer. Yeah. For instance, in this second tier, to read it off to you guys.
Hold on, before we get there, and to note is that as Joe reads these players, we won't be taking these players ahead of other players. We're reading our board. So when Joe reads these rankings out, you're going to hear Kyron Williams fall after a player that's going in the 5th round. Are we suggesting that you should draft the player that you're about to mention in the 2nd round or 1st round? No, that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is that this person should return this tier level of value.
That's exactly it. So you still draft them based upon your league. We're not saying that you should be moving the market and reaching on these guys astronomically, but we are saying that this is the value of them, and snagging them around early is not necessarily the worst idea, again, based upon the tier that they're in, and you make that decision. The first player is one that's, quite frankly, very disregarded, and that's David Montgomery. Steals a lot of touchdowns. He's not the sexy pick that Gibbs is, but we have him as the number 2 running back. Part of this is the fact that it's going to take Gibbs a while to get back to full strength, and they're going to lean on Monty a lot in the beginning. And the other part is that flat out, Detroit's going to score a lot of points, and Monty steals a lot of touchdowns.
And when you look at the things that back that up, you see an offense that's going to produce. You see an offense that has good offensive line, that's going to have decent enough game script that the run game is never really going to be out of the question. So, we have him there. And for anybody joining us right now, we're going through our tier list. And to use this tier list, we are saying that you look at the value in terms of the round that you're drafting in, and you think about how you can get certain players later, and how you can really think about, okay, do I need to look a little bit ahead for this player? So after Monty, we have Brees, Kyron, Mostert, Zach Moss, which is going to be surprising for a lot of people. and Travis Etienne Jr. And that rounds out our second tier. Now, to use this for drafting purposes this is what we would do. And this is what we've been showing you as we've been doing our best ball leagues. So let's say we're drafting at pick number 5 and we're not taking a wide receiver there. Say we want to take a running back. Well, our running back is Breece Hall, even though he's in that second tier for us after Christian McCaffrey because he's in a tier all of his own. We're taking Breece Hall. Then when it rolls down to the 5th round, 6th round, or even the 4th round, we're sitting here and we say, well, David Montgomery, we have as the potential to, with this, because this Gibbs injury is baked into these numbers now, is if there are going to be more opportunities or a lingering injury for Gibbs, David Montgomery is going to project way higher than where he's at right now. But right now, you can get him way lower. So we're going to try to build a team that has Breece and Monty on it. That's our goal because we have them both ranked in the top 5 at this position in terms of value in the market right now. Now, we also have Zach Moss. Now, Zach Moss sitting there in our second tier as our 6th best running back does not mean to draft Zach Moss first, 2nd, 3rd round.
No, it doesn't.
But you can get Zach Moss 8th, 9th, 7th round, and he's going to produce, and the numbers are even baking in. Chase Brown is there. With Moss there, Moss showed enough talent, and people are saying, well, he could be the next Alexander Madison. Yeah, there's a chance that might happen, but Vegas doesn't think so. The markets don't think so.
They're looking at him much more like he's going to do what Kareem did last year, and he's just going to get a lot of shallow touchdowns.
And if you're looking and you're thinking back to last year, Joe Mixon didn't have to be the best player. Joe Mixon didn't have to, but he finished top 5 last year in terms of PPR points, I believe, in terms of running backs, maybe half PPR. So you look at the value being returned there. I can get a guy that has the potential to reach a top 5 in any given week. And you're getting him so low. And same goes for Mostert. Mostert is much maligned in most fantasy circles. But when you really look at what's happening here is that, yes, Miami might get away from running the ball a lot. However, when they get into that red zone, there's a couple options that they have. You're most likely not running Devin Achane in the red zone.
No, you're not.
You're probably trying to find Jalen Waddle in the back corner for a nice tiptoe catch. You're probably maybe looking for Jonnu Smith in that area. And you might be looking for Tyreek on like a nice dig route or something like that, right? But if you're inside the 5, that's Mostert land.
That's 100% Mostert land.
There's a very good chance that they're going to be there a lot this year. And while he might not get 21 touchdowns, if he finishes with 10, maybe even regresses to 8, gets 900 yards to 1,000 yards, you are getting incredible value in the 6th, 7th, and 8th rounds. And that's one of the reasons he's in the 2nd tier. And it's surprising for most people, but it's really not when you get into it a little bit more. Now, the 3rd tier. A 3rd tier has a player that we valued a lot. And in June, we had this player as number 2 in terms of running backs on our draft board, and that's Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry's, we're not suggesting not to draft Derrick Henry.
Oh, still take Henry.
But the thing is that you might be able to get Derrick Henry late, 3rd round in most best ball leagues. In your home league, depending upon your teammates, you might have to take him in the 2nd round. And while he projects as our running back 8, he's also Underdog's running back 9. So you're not, our values are pretty much there
in line,
respect. And there's going to be touchdowns. The yardage, we're questioning the amount of yardage. Probably will land somewhere between 900 and 1,100 yards. Projecting 15 touchdowns is not out of the realm of possibility for Derrick Henry. But there's a lot of question marks. Devin Achane is the next one on the list, with Rachaad White being in that 3rd tier. Now, you'll be surprised by Rachaad White because he's not a player that we take often. And you're right about that. We have him ranked 10th. And one of the reasons we don't
take quite frankly, the reason we don't take Rachaad White often is his ADP is 62. So we always end up taking Monty around early because we have him 8 spots better. Higher.
And that's the way to use these rankings, right? Is that Rachaad White, while he's our running back 10, like you said, is being projected in the 3rd, 4th round, but we have Montgomery higher. So we are not taking our running back 10. We're trying to take our running back 2 later and building our team structurally around that. So that's one of the reasons why we don't take Rachaad White. We do question his volume this year, but when you look at it, there should be a lot.
This is also half PPR rankings. I mean, that has to be identified. That hurts Rachaad the most, actually.
So then coming down to our 4th tier. So we have Bijan, James Cook, Isaiah Pacheco, Najee Harris. Now, Joe loves Isaiah Pacheco. I love James Cook. Bijan Robinson is usually a guy we're not drafting in the 1st round because we have more value in Breece Hall. We have more value in Kyron. We have more value in
Bob, let me spend a minute about Atlanta in general, because Atlanta is the team that has the biggest disconnect between general hype masters at ESPN and what the actual market is putting their money on. If you listen to people out there talking about, oh, Cousins is going to be the best quarterback, London's going to be amazing, Pitts is going to do it, Bijan's going to go through the roof, you're going to think that they're going to score 40 points a game. This is projected to be a below average offense. And guess what? It's Atlanta. It normally is. I know that they just got a superstar quarterback who's never won a meaningful game. And I know that Bijan looks sexy as all can be. But the reality is that the market does not believe in the Falcons at all. And that is what is suppressing them more than anyone else. You're going to have people at your draft talking up one of those Falcons and how lucky they are that they got them. Let the Hawks fly away, because they are only going to hurt you. That's a team-wide analysis. But specifically here with Bijan, people are taking him as running back 2, running back 3 with Breece. He is not in that tier. Talent-wise, sure. He might be the most impressive runner in the league right now, with Chubb being down. But the reality is there's not going to be enough touchdowns to be scored. It's a coup situation. That's who you're going to want from Atlanta if you want anyone.
And building off that, 2 running backs in this tier, 3 running backs actually, that, Joe and I love all 4 of these running backs in this tier actually. But at value, we're not taking Bijan. And sometimes when you're looking at rankings, and let's say we built a wide receiver start. Let's say we went 3 wide receivers out the gate. We're not giving a chance at McCaffrey. We're not getting a chance at Henry. We're not getting a chance at Achane. We're not getting a chance at Cook. Pacheco,
so basically, in terms of your normal ADP, we just missed out on everyone before ETN.
Correct. But what we'll do, and what we did during our last show, is we took Najee a little bit early, but right around value, because we wanted to build Monty. We couldn't. We're not going to jump Mostert up that high because we know the value is we can get him a little bit later. And we're not jumping Moss up that high. So, yeah, of course, we'll take our running back 14 off the board. We'll start him on a week-to-week basis because he's probably going to produce. There's nothing wrong. Again, there's nothing wrong with the players in this tier at all. What we're speaking of more so is that returned value and where you're taking them. So, we often draft Cook and Pacheco, more often Cook than Pacheco, because of the value. But a guy like Cook, who ended with 2 touchdowns last year, does project for more touchdowns, does project to do more work and be better. And the decision that you have to come across is that if you want Monty, you can take both Cook and Monty back-to-back rounds if that's what you want to do. And you can have both of them. So it's all about your team building here. So
it's a great sense of you want to start with the receivers heavy.
Remember that. Now, as we get to these next 2 rankings, you're going to see 2 first-round running backs in these next 2 rankings. So we have, or 3 first-round running backs. We have Gibbs, Connor, Barkley, Walker. That's the next tier. And then Zeke, Robinson, Brian Robinson, Jonathan Taylor, and Devin Singletary. And you might say, Bob Joe, what are you thinking? Mm-hmm. Are you on something? Are you drinking? What's happening with Jonathan Taylor and Barkley? What we discussed with you many, many weeks ago is I like Taylor. I like Barkley. They're two of the best runners in the league, but they have two of the biggest question marks in the league. And if you were to say, hey, Bob, rank Jonathan Taylor and Saquon Barkley just by themselves, I'm probably going to have a hard time doing that because their situations are so variable similar.
Yeah, you put either one of these two on a team like Minnesota, they're in the top 5.
Yeah, and but so when it comes to Barkley, the biggest question, we discussed this many weeks ago, is the tush push. And what I said to you many weeks ago is I think Barkley has the talent that the tush push doesn't need to happen. What I shared with you a couple weeks ago again is that, I think he's going to be a good option, but there's a lot of good options on
there are. And the other thing that really gets missed a lot, and this needs to be considered, is that one thing with Philadelphia, maybe it's just Toronto, but I think it's the culture of the whole team, is that when they do that tush push, that stadium goes insane. And there is something about having an active crowd of momentum that I don't see them taking that off the table for a toss out to the left for Saquon. I just don't see it happening.
And so building off of this again is Taylor, similar situation, great offensive line, quarterback that they're not going to rein in. And so we have them ranked lower because it is our recommendation that, especially in best ball, you can build a more unique team by not taking Barkley or Taylor at the turn. And there's other value in the running back market with the David Montgomerys, the Mosterts, the Mosses, the Pachecos, the Najees a little bit later that you can survive not taking those two players. While do we think they have the potential on a given week? There's a good chance that if those quarterbacks don't rush it in, that they could reach that top 5 mentality because they've been there before. We've seen it before. That there's a lot of things in their way. One player I want to talk about just briefly.
Well, Bob, we're gonna have to rush you. We're almost got to start receivers.
The rest of the rankings is just putting this into practice. Is that in my home league, 15 running backs got taken in the first 3 rounds. So I had to push Ken Walker, who's our 18th best running back, in that 3rd round, which normally doesn't happen. But in a home league, anything can happen. But I built a team that has Walker and then 3 running backs from our second tier in it. So it is possible as you go down this list, you can keep going. So as we go and we just finish out the rankings here, you're going to hear a couple more players. We have Tajay Spears ranked in his own tier after Devin Singletary. Then we have the J.K. Dobbins, Pollard, Zamir White, Joe Mixon tier. There's a lot of question marks in that tier as well. The value is good enough on some of those players that you can take a chance. We like to take a chance on Dobbins a lot. Then our 28, 29, 30, 31, Javonte Williams, Rashina Ali does skate into these rankings a little bit here because that's taking into account Henry's health as well. You have Jerome Ford, Tyler Algier, again, taking into the rankings. And then I'm questioning this player in the rankings, but,
Well, guys, we appreciate you being with us here today. We're going to be with you again 3 seconds, talking about the wide receivers. And then later on tonight, you're going to see us putting these drafts into action and winning $1.5 million in the Underdog Best Ball Contest. Subscribe, and we will be with